Our presentation is on cyber violence and a large project that we jointly implement, how to counteract and how to prevent cyber violence. Let me start with saying that as a foundation, in the past it was called No One's Children and Now Empowering Children Foundation. Already back in 2008, we were trying to respond to the phenomenon of cyberbullying. And then we launched the campaign, Stop the Cyber Violence. And this is the poster that you can see. This was the poster from the campaign. You may still remember it. Unfortunately, the cyber violence did not stop in ongoing years. It was increasingly developing, and along with actually appearance of new forms of cyber activities. So every year we hear about some cases of cyber violence and similar issues, which is followed by hundreds or thousands of smaller cases in schools. A few months ago, we've heard a story of teenage girls who were bullying over their friend. They were humiliating her, burning her body with cigarettes and hitting her. This was all videoed by a smartphone, and just by accident, the journalist found this content. This case was made published, and this brought end to the violence. However, the victim of this violence ended up under the protection and assistance of psychologists. So once we hear about such cases, you think how to address the issues. We know that problem is difficult, the challenges are difficult, and there are no easy solutions. We also have the feeling that the tools that we have are not sufficient, and that's why, together with our partners, we decided to initiate an impact program, interdisciplinary model of counteracting cyber violence, and this acronym in English is IMPACT, and the educational proposal of a longer process, the assumption is actually 10 lessons, 10 hours, and the program should have an impact on the young people and effectively prevent violence-related behaviors. This is a project funded by the National Center of Research and Development in the area of research and innovations, and this project is coordinated by Pro Esterno Foundation. Our foundation is a partner to the project. We also cooperate with the Institute of Labor in Łódź, Warsaw Technical University, and Department of Psychology of the Warsaw University. So these are the partners. The program covers 4 thematic modules on privacy and safety online, the phenomenon of the electronic aggression from the perspective of offenders and victims, positive use of internet, and the very important and the biggest component is about building psychological competences that support positive behaviors online. And here I would like to give floor to Professor Anna Szuster from the University in Warsaw. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's right. This is interdisciplinary program, and this is not only limited to the aspects that you've seen on the previous slides, but this interdisciplinary program means that within the 10 hours allocated, we decided to focus focus attention and activities of our students on the online and offline areas. If using simple messages like "Don't do this, don't harm the others, don't bully over other kids." If this was possible to upbring children and to solve all problems, the world will be very simple. And there wouldn't be any conflicts. However, psychologists and educators perfectly know that the declared attitudes have nothing to do with the truth and with things that which are going on around us. That's why we decided to strengthen something which can be more effective buffer for the negative behaviors in internet. Some of these 10 hours program we decided to devote to enhancement of some psychological skills that can be a great barrier of negative behaviors in internet. They're also of universal nature. They relate to the behaviors in offline and online world, but they also build a certain developmental potential for the future. What kind of competences, what kind of skills are we talking about? Which of them are so impactful? There are many of them. We focused on 2. However, we name here 3 as we decided actually to focus also on something which is called self-control. So the self-control and the perception of perspective. So self-control is about anticipation, thinking of the future, harnessing some automatic behaviors. That's why we decided actually to focus on this, and we prepare just separate lessons. So these competences we decided to develop, and students should pay attention to these specific aspects. Why? Why these competences? Because I have quite a broad knowledge in them. I know the regulatory functions. There are plenty of surveys and research on self-control, proving positive consequences for education, for ability to negotiate, interpersonal sensitivity, limitation of conflicts, and avoiding collisions with undertaking actions which are illegal. Another argument for these competences was the pilot program that we ran during a 2-year study. And this pilot program proved that deficits in the area of self-control and adoption of the perspective are a very important scientific predicator to become a victim or offender or a witness of cyber violence. So we had this evidence coming from our pilot program. Another argument that convinced us to focus on these areas of competences was the fact that we learned a lot about the way that our brains work when come in contact with digital media. So digital media increase the fragmentation of the reading of a given text content. They lower effective memory abilities. They increase multitasking and superficial way of processing the information. All these justified our focus on these competences. So the philosophy behind, the idea behind our project in these competences was covering the pilot and the research phases. And here we proved that these competences relate to negative behaviors online, and supporting them would increase selective behaviors in digital space. So let's have a look at these competences. Self-control. It's a complex, multidimensional cognitive competences. It has its neuronal initiations. The cortex is responsible for these cognitive competences. It also helps to develop educational and cognitive skills. Knowing that, we planned some lessons, and I would like to share some examples of them. There is, for instance, one lesson where we teach about automatic behaviors, and we teach them that majority of our behaviors and attitudes happen beyond our control, and so as Freud said, we are aware of the tip of the iceberg, whereas actually everything else happens elsewhere, and it is just done automatically. And that's why we wanted to show to our students what automatic behaviors are. Automatisms. So we tell the students a banal, simple story where a young boy goes after school to the cafe. He wants to go for ice cream or maybe for a cake and then for a cookie, and then he wants to go home. This piece of text is read by the teacher and students after listening exercise. By the way, this text is also illustrated. Our foundation prepared some images supporting this text. And Students' task is actually indicate where in the story we have the automatic, demonstrate automatic behaviors. There is a big surprise because this whole sequence of 5 minutes behaviors, it's just automatic. This is first important lesson that proves, that makes students aware that our daily behaviors, daily functioning is exactly as the metaphor of a robot in myself. So basically, these robotic behaviors, it's all about automatisms and self-control. Then another example where we wanted to show students that even the action of reading is automatic. So we just give them a few sentences. We just show you one of the sentences here on the slide. You can easily read this sentence. Students can easily read this sentence as well. Why? Because we read automatically. We don't use algorithms. We read heuristically. Therefore, we are able to read the text, which is full of errors, by the way. And students start learning and discovering that, in fact, it's getting easier and easier to give examples of automatic behaviors. So the conclusion of our lessons is that the automatic behaviors are also demonstrated during our behaviors online. Then we have homework, and the students are actually to describe the automatic behaviors online. These automatisms online can be limited, and this is next exercise that we want to do. The practice makes the master, by the way. And for instance, we show them funny situations or funny stories. This is an example where we are going to focus our vision on the cross, and then the task is that we distract the focus from the dot, and we ask them to read the letter. It is very difficult because actually it is difficult to hamper to stop the automatic movement of our eyeball not to avoid looking at the dot. So these are examples that show what automatic behaviors are, and what is it about to stop such automatic behaviors. Then another example of empathy. First, the students recognize emotions, the simple emotions first, and everyone is successful here in guessing. Then complex reactions and emotions. This is getting more complicated, and then we start discussion what the emotions are, how to recognize them, how you can recognize emotions in internet space. The typical example of adoption of perspective or entering into certain perspective is another exercise, which is, by the way, very popular among students. We just give them this kind of anagram. This is a real word, and then we ask them to estimate how long will it take to guess the word. So one group is estimating the time, and the other group is truly actually coming up with the words. So those who estimate, they estimate much shorter time, and those who do the real exercise, it takes longer time. And then we have a discussion always, what really happened, what was avoided, what was actually somehow omitted, forgotten, and that's exactly adoption of perspective or entering into perspective. And based on that, we build the discussion. So Madam Dr. Barlińska will tell you more about these exercises, about different perspectives as well. I'm gonna be very quick and brief, and I'm going to tell you about two psychological dimensions which were very important for the program. However, they are not only addressed by our psychological lessons. So the role of the witness of cyber violence and importance of knowledge on specificity of online communication. I will discuss these two aspects. Why witness of cyber violence? There were a few premises for discussing the issue of witnesses. In online and offline world, witnesses, these are people who are very rarely neutral. They can impact the process of the violence process. There is a huge potential of impact that was mentioned by Szymon. Moreover, witnesses are the broadest group. If you think of offenders or victims, these are also people who may be witnesses of cyber violence. That's why we address the topic of witnesses in the broadest possible way. Now, the specificity of online communication, qualitative as well as quantitative data, and on the whole survey that was a starting point for this program, for implementation of our program, proved that actually this that in media we are actually reacting less emotionally than in the direct contact. And young people are actually also quite prone to this kind of impact. Yesterday we discussed about the young people test the true borders. They come into interaction with some specific technologies, and therefore, while communicating online, they demonstrate behaviors that they probably would not demonstrate in offline world.
So during one lesson, we decided to reflect a little bit about this kind of communication and how it could affect me, how it could lead to violent behaviors, and as an alternative to such unwanted, undesirable behaviors, we decided to teach them to teach them different ways of communicating, things that ways of communicating, ways of formulating messages related to themselves. So when we talk about early adolescence, because precisely we target this program at them, they have the potential for all sorts of competences. However, their skills, their knowledge have not yet been crystallized. So if we teach this young person to, or haven't been generalized, if we teach them to behave appropriately in a library, this will not exactly generalize itself onto how to behave on a tramway. So we have to teach them right now very specific behaviors in very specific context. For example, like having a conflict, fighting with someone, but using technology. So let me show you another example, how we would like to get them to learn the right behaviors. So, for example, we tell them about anonymity, tell them about the cockpit effect, where I don't have access to the cockpit, I don't see that person, therefore it's easier for me to attack that person or even hurt them because I don't see their reactions. Also, a sense of anonymity. A sense of anonymity, I, as a perpetrator, as an offender, I'm more anonymous. Also, availability, 24 hours a day. Like, for example, if someone is at home, for example, they are always available through social media. And if certain behaviors are victimizing someone, maybe they should think of resisting their peer group. And number 4, I don't know how many people will see the material that is something that degrades me and humiliates me.
We've also said we covered a cycle of 4 lessons, psychological lessons. I focus on the summary or conclusion of all these psychological skills that are actually set in a context of the new media. The basic target of this lesson, the basic objective, was to make students aware that there are specific elements that will make them to behave in a certain ways when they are online, and normally they probably would not act this way. Purposefully I showed you some graphics that we use in some exercises, and I want to illustrate it here. First, students listen to record using the language, which is simple and for young people, well understood by young people. After this record and the message, actually, students are asked to see these 4 graphics that I showed you and think which of them illustrate the given phenomena in the best possible way. Then we discuss it, and it's not important to give right answers. That's why these graphics are so simplified. The value as such is the process, the discussion, the way I see it, the way I behave in the context of new technologies, and what does this mean for me. In the second part of lesson, as I said, we focus on practicing positive alternative. And now let me give floor back to Szymon, because we are running short of time. But before that, we've mentioned many times the need for individualization of a program. The tool that we are testing now is a form of a pilot program, pilot tool. We want to address the topic of the specific gender-related needs, and if you're interested in the cooperation, so that you, for instance, would like us actually to implement such pilot in your schools, you get actually the information from us how much these materials must be tailor-made for 2 groups, for boys and girls. Then please approach me. I'll be available during the break, and I'll be happy to establish contact.
In conclusion, I would like to also demonstrate that this program is so much bigger, so much broader. There is an introductory lesson, then you have a set of lessons, a set of classes that build the right competences, even without the context of cyber violence. And then we move on to talking about being a victim, being a witness, being a perpetrator. And then we finish with a set of positive messages, and there is one lesson purely about technological competences. We did a pilot for this project, 31 classes over 500 students took part. I know that in this room there are teachers who actually conducted those classes, and initial evaluation is positive. At least the view of teachers is positive. Among students, around 60% of these are positive. And you know that it's difficult to satisfy teenagers. I think 60-something% is pretty good. And also, what's valuable is to hear some feedback from the teachers who were doing those classes. Like, for example, the psychological part of the impact program really moves those kids, inspires them, and provokes discussion. Also, many teachers were saying that the fact that the program was a little bit longer, they opened up. Students opened up. They started talking about some things that indicated that the problem was even bigger than they had thought, and so on. So this is going to, or the package is going to contain lesson scenarios, manual for teachers, 7 presentations, 6 videos, a platform, and we are also preparing or developing an e-learning course that's going to contain a set of instructions on how to use all those materials to run those lessons. This program, or most of these materials, have been already developed, finalized. We still need approval from the grant authority, but we're convinced that still this year it's going to become available for all of you. You will be able to go to edukacja.fdds.pl. Go there. Please also sign up for our newsletter, and then as soon as we have all the materials ready, then you'll get an email from us. Thank you.